Good day, and welcome to our program, The Church and the Poor. For many, the invitation to come and see remains a distant dream, but for some, it is a challenge and a reality, who have answered the call to come and to experience the life of service of the poor. Today, we welcome our guests to Jamaica and the Missionaries of the Poor, Father Stuart Crevcoure and a graduate, Levi Dittman, from Oklahoma State University, St. John's University Chapel. Tell me, Father Stuart, what drew you to Missionaries of the Poor? What attracted you to come to Jamaica this time?
Well, actually, we had begun looking at mission opportunities for our college students at Oklahoma State University who are involved in the Catholic campus ministry. And we'd had a few of our parishioners who had been involved with the Missionaries of the Poor already, and had been down here to Jamaica working with the Missionaries of the Poor. And we had taken up donations to send to the missionaries in the parish, oftentimes as part of our Christmas giving program. However, when we were looking for a service opportunity for our students, I talked to the parishioners who had worked with the Missionaries of the Poor because I had learned more about the Missionaries of the Poor in the process, and I had seen the program on EWTN with Missionaries of the Poor, and having become familiar with what they did, I asked our parishioners, well, would this be a good fit for our college students? Is it too intense an experience? Is it something that would be, or is it something that would really be a good experience for them? And they said they thought it would work well. They had had marvelous experiences and couldn't say enough good things about the work they had done with the Missionaries of the Poor. And so last year was the first year we had taken a group of students here to Jamaica.
How many?
I believe there were about 12 last year who had come down, and they came back and had a marvelous experience, and so we hope to be able to continue it not only this year but into the future.
Becomes a tradition.
Yes, exactly.
Good. And how has your experience been? How has it been?
Yes, this was my first time being here in Jamaica.
You went to the centers, for instance, and you did works with the brothers. What did you do actually when you went to the centers? Yes,
when we were in the centers, we did very much helping the brothers with whatever needed to be done. Oftentimes, especially in the morning, there was a lot of cleaning that needed to be done, cleaning the centers after the night, and getting many of the residents ready. Did you feel awkward doing
this type of work? I mean, it's very manual, very hands-on.
You know, I didn't. Oddly enough, one evening at dinner, there was another student from Nebraska who is here working this week as well, and she had an uncle, I believe, who is a priest, and she asked me about whether it was odd for a priest to be doing manual labor, and I told her, I said, it's like, no. I said, Jesus was a carpenter. Wow. I said, he worked with his hands. I said, it wouldn't be right for a priest to do anything which endangers losing any digits in his ministry. However, I said at the same time, it really, there's a great joy for me to be able to be here. It really has been like a retreat. And that has been a marvelous experience. And it's very, I think the hands-on work with the poor is very important. That our charity shouldn't be so antiseptic, that it's a matter of donations are always important in supporting charitable endeavors, but it's very important, I think, for people to come face to face and hand in hand with the poor. Right.
Levi, this is your second trip here.
It is.
Yes. How has it been? What brought you back?
It's been great. That trip last year really renewed my faith quite a bit. And not to say that it died out over the year, but just looking back on my first trip and knowing that this trip was coming up, I really felt called to come back. Right, exactly. I felt to be able to come back and to be able to grow in my faith that much more would be an incredible opportunity that I shouldn't pass up.
Right. And how has this experience influenced anything at all with what you hope to do in the future with your
my first mission trip ever was a medical mission to Nicaragua.
Okay.
And that's what got me interested in mission work in general. That trip was lacking
so this is the missionary in the making, huh?
Yeah, that trip was lacking a spiritual guidance for me.
Okay.
And when I came down here, it's like putting two pieces of the puzzle together. And I was able to serve the poor, but also live the lives that you brothers live, and have that prayer. And I think that applying that to my life and being able to use that as far as medicine goes in my future, being able to serve the poor, but also not leave out the spiritual aspect of serving.
Tell us a bit about this, Father Stuart, the lifestyle of the brothers, getting up early in the morning, and the prayers, liturgy of the hours, mass, meditations.
It's actually been one of the things our students enjoys the most. And it was one of the reasons really why, in looking for a service opportunity for our students to be involved in, I really felt like, because there are poor that we could serve in the United States. I mean, there are opportunities to do charitable works. I mean, we have many poor people in the United States, but the thing I think that is so wonderful about coming down here to work with the missionaries of the poor and the way they have everything set up for the volunteers to work in the centers is that it's not just about
social work.
Yes, it's not just about the humanitarian effort of alleviating the sufferings of the poor. It's learning what within us motivates us to do that. And looking at the lives of the brothers, how they are strengthened through their life of prayer and cultivating that interior life in Christ. That is what enables us to go out and not just perform humanitarian deeds, but to go out in active Christian charity and to nourish that life of Christ within us so that we can...
So you see there's an integration between the two.
Yes, exactly, because what is wonderful about this experience of working with the missionaries of the poor and the integration of the prayer and the work in what we do is that in cultivating and growing that sense of Christ within us, we take the Christ that is in us and we meet the Christ that is in the poor. And that is, I think, the communion of the church in a nutshell. The Christ in us meets the Christ in the poor, and we see the communion of the church manifested in a powerful way that simply doing things for the poor doesn't do. It needs to be, we need to be sustained by that spirituality, which really requires, I think, this kind of intensive experience that we have in working with the missionaries of the poor.
Pope Francis has said, I think in the early weeks of his pontificate, he said, and he exclaimed, I think, oh, how I would love a poor church that serves the poor. How do you see that manifesting itself in your experience, Father Stuart, this past week?
I think it's again, I think the reason that hands-on work with the poor is so important. Because there are poor in every country, and even then there are many different kinds of poverty. Mother Teresa talked about the fact that even in wealthy industrial nations there is a great spiritual poverty that exists, and we see that often, I think, in the United States. However, especially that hands-on work with the poor, and when we read the parable of the Good Samaritan, I mean, the Good Samaritan not only donated, of the wealth that he had in order to take care of the poor person he had pulled out of the ditch, but with his own two hands, he went and he got involved. And there is something about, again, that encounter, I think, between ourselves and when we minister to the poor that it really is sort of unstopping that charity within us, that it opens the door wider, and that love and that spirit of charity really begins to flow until it becomes a mighty river. And I think that is what Christ would want for his church, and an outpouring of love and charity, especially for the least among us.
Great. Is there one experience, Levi, you would like to share that you had this past week at the centers or even at the house that you take back home with you and you might want to share with people back home that has stuck with you, that has really impacted you?
I can think of one in particular. I was over at Bethlehem. There's a young man there that was actually 2 years older than I am, but he was much smaller. And he seemed to be paralyzed, seemingly from the neck down, couldn't move anything but his face. And I had the opportunity to feed that man. And he can't talk, he can't really do much. But as I'm feeding him this bottle, he's staring into my eyes, literally staring into my, gazing into my eyes as if to say thank you. And
he can't speak.
He can't speak at all. And you know, those moments, and there were several other moments like that, where maybe words aren't exchanged, but
he spoke with his eyes.
you can definitely feel it. Definitely.
Right. You will share that when you go back.
Of course.
Yeah, go tell others what you have seen and heard. Well, what about these, your students? You have anything to share about your experiences?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was just seeing the joy. I visited Lourdes Place, Bethlehem, and Jacob's Well.
Okay.
But I think the biggest one for me was I walked into Jacob's Well.
Okay.
And
that's the home for women.
Yes.
Right.
And the women they had huge smiles on their face when they saw us, and they were coming up to us and hugging us and shaking our hands, and they knew like all these different songs, and they might not know their name or anything like that, but they were just so joyous. And you could really just see how God has influenced them and works through them. And I knew coming here that even though I was coming to serve them, they would serve me in some way, but I didn't realize just how much until I walked through those doors and I saw them.
My name is Kevin. The opportunities we have to be here is wonderful, because the service that I get to put my hands in, that you brothers do on a daily basis, it's changing, our faith that I have had for 22 years. It's, I don't get the chance to grow drastically like I am here. The prayer, the people, the residents, and the brothers, it's all focused on God and in Christ. It just fills my heart with joy, and it's just such a great experience to take back home.
Anyone else would like to share? Yes. What's your name?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Mitra, and I would definitely say that this is my first time to Jamaica at all. And at the beginning, it was extremely overwhelming. My first day was at Bethlehem, but definitely like the moments for me that just touched my heart the most was something very similar to Levi's. At those moments when you're feeding people and doing like simple tasks, changing their diapers, and they're looking at you, and you know that they can't express much, but you know it's like that act of love is right there. And just knowing that when I go home, I have to do this at home too. It's like something that I need to continue. And the prayer that we do throughout the day was definitely a blessing. It's something that's helped me a lot.
It might be a bigger shop going back home to do it.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Next.
My name's Thomas, and this is my first ever mission trip, so it's been quite the experience for me. And I came into this really not having much of an idea of what would be going on, and was fairly
That's probably the best, not to know anything, just to go.
Exactly. I knew a little bit of what would be going on, but then we got here, and our first day of work, I was just overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, this is, people actually live like this. This actually exists. But I think one experience that really stuck out to me, that was when I was at Bethlehem. There was a kid in the smaller boys' room named Brian who needed to be fed and needed help eating, and so I was sitting there feeding him, and it was just a very spiritual moment, because he was looking at me like saying thank you. And then later on, after I had finished feeding him and was just walking around looking at the other residents there, I went back over to him because he was obviously enjoying the attention, and then he kind of stuck his arms out and wanted to be picked up, and so I eventually picked him up and had him standing, and he had some sort of problem or deformity with his legs that they're weak and he's not able to use them, and it was just eye-opening and just gave me an amazing feeling just to see the look of joy that just came on his face from just something as simple as being picked up. So it was. And
we take so much for granted ourselves. We have all our limbs intact, and we still complain, and we don't use them properly, and it really challenges us.
Yes,
as you have been saying, it really ministers to us.
It was a very amazing and humbling experience, just how fortunate we are and how much we do take for granted.
Yes. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Sarah. This is my first time in Jamaica. I think for me, the most touching moment was that when I went to Bethlehem and I had this little girl immediately come up to me and just like jumped on me. She had this look on her face like, I'm so glad you are here. It was like, I don't know, I could just feel the love radiating off of her. And she was so cute. She started moving her head in the direction that she wanted me to kind of like move her and stuff. Like just being with her, I think really was just really touching. Along with like the feeding, also I can agree with everybody here that said that. I mean, there's definitely something to that. They can't feed themselves, and most of them are at the age that they should be able to, but feeding them and with the look in their eyes says it all.
My name's Amanda, and this is actually my first time to Jamaica and on a mission trip. And I'd have to say that it was really overwhelming at first, but as the week progressed, I started to love it even more. And just the time that the brothers spent taking care of all these people kind of shocked me, and it was just amazing to see how much love was in each of the centers. And it was really neat to see some of the other residents feeding everyone. You know, those who couldn't do it were being fed by other residents. And just the joy in the place was really amazing. And it also helped me realize how much I take for granted back at home. And I'll take that with me as I go.
Yes, Father Stuart. So when you go back to your ministry, what would you share with your people, for instance? What would you want to take with you to them about your experience here? Can you just tell us?
I think one of the most important things is teaching them about how integrated in our Christian life prayer and our works of charity need to be. That again, finding that involvement with the poor is something that's not merely theoretical or just a matter of writing a check or making a donation, but something that truly teaches them to reach out to others who are in need. Because again, we do have a great deal of poverty in the United States, and even in our community of Stillwater in Oklahoma. I mean, we have a couple nursing homes that are not a far cry from some of the centers. That it's difficult work, and hopefully I think being able to convey to people the experience that we have had here, and being able to talk about it with them and help them to understand something of the experience will help them in becoming more active in those works of charity themselves, helping them to understand how to sustain it as well. But not to do charity as sort of an afterthought of, well, I really ought to do this. It's like, but really making it something. Yes, that is fundamental to the way that they live their Christian life. That it's a very conscious commitment to serving the needs of the poor. It's very enriching because. Again, as I think Pope Francis has called us to do, that is, even as priests, we're not called to closet ourselves in our parishes and in our ministries and leave the work of interacting with the poor to others, but that it needs to be something that we are also actively involved in ourselves. Because
he talks about taking the church to the streets.
Yes. Everybody in the church is called to be actively involved in those works of charity, and and as a priest, I think that's true as well. People can tell, a priest who is comfortable with the poor.
Right.
I was one of my favorite saints has always been St. Francis de Sales,
Okay.
who emphasized for the diocesan clergy the need to be accessible to everybody. That when somebody comes to the rectory or comes to your office, that it doesn't matter whether they are rich or poor; they should feel equally comfortable in your presence. And so I think it's very refreshing and renewing for me in my priesthood to have this opportunity to truly work with the poor. So many people have been amazed at Pope Francis, who has this ability to really reach out and interact with the poor. Yes, and yet at the same time, I want to tell people it's not that hard. You can find the opportunities to do it.
Right where you are.
And I think Pope Francis would be happier if everybody was doing what he is doing and not simply admiring what he does.
True. True. Yeah. Levi, any parting words?
Yeah, and I mean, just to go along with what Father Stuart was saying, as a college student, we experience our own sense of poverty, obviously not to the extreme that some of the residents have here in Jamaica, but, taking out loans for classes and stuff, that can be trying, and especially for the Christian college students that want to go on mission trips, they automatically it's kind of a no for a lot of them, because they say, oh, I don't have the funds to, buy an airplane ticket. Exactly. But God really does provide. I thought the same thing, and there are others around that are more than willing to help us go. And it's like Father Stuart was saying, more than just sending a check. It's the come and see attitude that really makes the mission trip what it is.
Great. So we want to thank Father Stuart and Levi and the students and parishioners of St. John's University Parish, Stillwater, Oklahoma, for coming to share your holidays with us and your faith, which is so important. I want to really thank you, and for sharing this to the wider world. There is something very special in the service of the needy and the poor, as Jesus promised us.